Today from the global lane, the deep state poised to sabotage Donald Trump's second term, slowing down presidential appointment confirmations by 6 months to a year.
Those appointments should be voted on within a 30-day period. That's an eminently reasonable period of time for a hiring decision to be made.
The president-elect's life under threat. Can the Secret Service be trusted to protect him?
He is at grave risk, and I pray and believe and hope that he's even using his own private security services to beef it up.
Tax cuts and deregulation. What Trump's plans may mean for consumers.
All those things are going to make the economy more productive, which should mean that we see wages growing faster as the economy grows faster.
Where's the Good Samaritan? FEMA withheld help for Trump supporters in hurricane-devastated Florida and North Carolina. And it's all right here on the global lane. Deep state danger. As politicians call for the nation to unite in the wake of Donald Trump's landslide victory over Kamala Harris, there may be a darker, more sinister effort at play by forces determined to sabotage Donald Trump's agenda. Here with more is Paul Steidler. He's senior fellow at the Lexington Institute, a public policy think tank based in Arlington, Virginia. Paul, the FBI has announced charges in an Iranian assassination plot against Donald Trump. Is this a prelude to something bigger? How great is the threat now to Donald Trump's life prior to his January 20th inauguration?
Well, all threats, especially from a nation state like Iran to the president's life, need to be taken extremely seriously. And all the stops should be pulled out as far as protection of the president goes.
Well, I know that you maintain that the deep state is plotting to sabotage Trump. First, for our viewers who may not know what you mean by deep state, who is the deep state? What are they plotting?
Right. Well, at the Lexington Institute, Gary, we've looked at the presidential appointments process here. And that process for several decades in Washington has been broken. Left unchecked, President Trump is going to have to wait 6 months to a year to have many of his key appointees confirmed by the U.S. Senate to important positions. This is a trend that's been going on for about 40 years. And it's very important at this point that the president-elect be aware of this, which he certainly seems to be, move very expeditiously on appointments, which he's taken the first steps here. And once those appointments are named and once they're given to the Senate, those appointments should be voted on within a 30-day period. That's an eminently reasonable period of time for a hiring decision to be made. And it's also in the nation's best interest to have that done. These people are going to play extremely important roles in the government. They're going to be responsible for overseeing trillions of dollars in spending. They're going to be responsible for overseeing the 4.4 million federal civilian and military employees in the federal government. And those are people who will have been selected by President Trump, and they can make the rest of the bureaucracy work as it should and call out bad actors who are in there. So without those actions, those bad actors are going to have more leeway.
Well, you lay out 3 steps that the Trump team needs to take during the transition. First, you say he must immediately prepare and vet administration nominees now. Don't wait until January. What do you think so far, his efforts 1 week after the election?
Well, so far, so good. The president, for example, recently named, or 2 days ago, named Gail Slater, a woman who works for Senator J.D. Vance, to head up the transition at the Federal Trade Commission. That's an area that's become highly politicized. She's very well respected by both Democrats and Republicans. And So that, as an example, is a very good move. In general, the president has moved much more quickly than 8 years ago when he was elected. As you may recall, 8 years ago, there was drama with Chris Christie heading up the transition and him getting fired. There was infighting between some Republican National Committee operatives and the Trump team. He doesn't have those distractions right now, so he can move forward very quickly and expeditiously. He also has experience of being in the government and knowing the important roles of these different people. Be it at the FTC, the Department of Justice, you name it, as far as departments go.
Yeah, nothing like experience to learn from. Now, you say he must prioritize key positions, so which ones should he focus on initially? Which ones, in your opinion, are the most crucial?
Well, some of them are obvious, the Department of State, Department of Defense, and CIA heads. But we also think it's very important that he take a look at the people who are overseeing business issues in the Department of Commerce, at the Federal Trade Commission, and at the Department of Justice, especially in its antitrust division. These are supposed to be nonpartisan entities that are focused on making the American economy function optimally. At the FTC, for example, which its basic business is to adjudicate legal matters, its chair became the activist and the point person for saying that the reason grocery prices had gone up is somehow grocery executives decided to price gouge everybody starting in February of 2021. So that has to be cleaned up. It has to be cleaned up quickly. And it certainly looks from the actions this weekend that the president is aware of that. He seems very tuned in on transition issues. And we would, urge him to prioritize those appointments, especially at defense, especially at entities like the Federal Trade Commission, and to continue what he's doing and to really accelerate that process.
Okay, we'll see if the president-elect takes your advice, Paul. Paul Steidler, Senior Fellow at the Lexington Institute, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
It was great to be with you, Gary.
Up next, a former CIA whistleblower weighs in on the threat to President-elect Trump's life and agenda and explains how he should proceed in dismantling the deep state. Dismantling the deep state is a top priority for the incoming Trump administration. But more danger for Donald Trump may lie ahead. In 2017, at the start of Trump's first term, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer warned him about taking on the deep state.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
Crossfire hurricane, Russia collusion, a 2-year special prosecutor investigation, 2 impeachments, federal and state indictments, 2 assassination attempts. So what can we expect in the days ahead? Well, joining us to share some thoughts is former whistleblower and pastor Pedro Israel Orta. Pastor Orta served in counterintelligence and as an operations officer at the CIA for 18 years. Also in the Office of the Inspector General for the intelligence community. He's author of the book, The Broken Whistle, A Deep State Run Amok, and producer of a documentary out in February called Deep State Gangsters. Pedro, you're a part of the deep state for 18 years. You know it well. So in your estimation, how capable and willing are our intelligence agencies to protect the incoming president from another assassination attempt?
It's a very, very difficult topic to quickly expound upon. Deep state, national security bureaucracy, entrenched since the very beginnings of its foundation, 1947 National Security Act. We're talking about a CIA that historically has lacked congressional oversight, which led to serious abuses in the 50s and the 60s. They tried to mitigate it in the 70s with the Church Committee, but yet once again, 80s and 90s, their power grew again. And post 9/11, the Patriot Act and so forth gave them vast additional powers, plus, the technological surveillance state. So with these vast powers, it is very easy for them to abuse these powers, lie to the FISA courts, for example, to turn collection on political adversaries, as we witnessed, and for that matter, manufacture evidence, as they did against General Flynn and to a degree, President Trump. So it's a perilous environment. Priority number 1 is going to be to root out and clean out this corruption. It's going to demand that he appoint specific personnel like Devin Nunes, Kash Patel, Rick Grinnell, people who have taken on this deep state. And they're going to have to dig deep and go into the senior executive service, the senior intelligence service. These are the higher ups, and start cleaning people out.
Well, many Americans have criticized the Secret Service for not having enough assets on the ground and in the air protecting the former president in Butler, Pennsylvania. We still haven't seen the attempted assassin's phone records. Many of the details are still being withheld from Congress and the public 4 months after the incident. Share your thoughts on this. What have you learned?
Well, here lies the problem. You mentioned it. Congress has not received information. There's been a serious lack of congressional oversight, where what I mean by this is Congress has the power to demand for information from the government bureaucracy, the executive branch. That's part of their legislative oversight duties. But what happens here is these agencies know that they can not comply, they can lie, they can manipulate, they can delay, they can cheat, and Congress will do nothing. Well, Congress needs to step it up, and particularly one lever is funding. Now, Congress has the ability to completely shut off, not necessarily all funding, but relevant funding for some of these entities that refuse to comply. If Congress would do their due diligence and stop the funding, I can assure you that these agencies will comply and turn over records.
Yeah, money talks, doesn't it? On a scale of 1 to 10, Pedro, how great do you believe the threat is to Donald Trump's life at this time?
Well, there's a couple of things. Extremely grave. I mean, we've had now, and we know it's a fact, Iranians trying to potentially assassinate him. For that matter, we have a weakened bureaucracy at the Secret Service with the DEI policies that completely just gutted and undermined their mission. So, I mean, there are serious questions about the Secret Service ability to protect the president. So consequently, yes, I mean, he is at grave risk. And I pray and believe and hope that he's even using his own private security services to beef it up.
Okay, with Donald Trump promising to dismantle the deep state, then, how, in your opinion, can that be accomplished, other than the money?
Well, again, first and foremost, quality appointments. He cannot make the mistake he made in his first administration. For example, Mike Pompeo. I like Mike Pompeo. I like his Christian beliefs. But honestly, I was there when Mike Pompeo was there. It was not Pompeo's agencies. It was Brennan's agencies still being run by Brennan's personnel. And he had handpicked Gina Haspel to be his deputy. So first and foremost, President Trump is going to have to select some individuals who have proven themselves to have either fought or combat the deep state.
So who do you think he needs as National Intelligence Director and maybe even FBI Director?
I would recommend for the National Intelligence Director, Rick Grinnell. Reason being is he proved himself as the acting DNI. It wasn't until he went in after they basically told Daniel Coates to leave. He was another just stooge, in my opinion, where basically it was still Clapper's DNI under Daniel Coates. So Rick Grinnell went in, and only then did the DNI started releasing documents on the Russia hoax and so forth. For FBI, I believe that we need a strong law enforcement type officer. I mean, some possible names: Sheriff Lamb in Arizona, Bernard Carrick, a former New York City police commissioner, Dan Bongino. If not one of these three, maybe somebody of that kind of caliber who has the law enforcement background, but more importantly, is not just talk, but action.
And Pedro, you've written Broken Whistle. Tell us about your forthcoming documentary, Deep State Gangsters. I know it's set for release in February. And as a pastor, I'm assuming you view many of the actions of the deep state as evil. So what role is God playing here in protecting the country and the incoming president?
Well, it comes down to a poem by a German theologian, Niemöller. Who will speak for you when they come looking for you? He was in Germany prior to the formation of the Nazi government, during the Nazi regime and post-Nazi regime. And the bottom line was, you know, if we fail to act, fail to speak up, fail to take action, we're complicit with evil. There is a need for light to be light, not for us to hide our light. So we as Christians, as believers, have to arise. And what I mean by this is, I mean, take, for example, Congress. We have many congressmen who wear their Christianity like if it was a suit, a code of honor. But yet when it comes time to take action against this evil, they do nothing. So the point of this documentary, at the end, it's basically, we need light to be late. And what happens here is, if people don't rise up and start taking action, it emboldens and empowers these rogue elements of our government to become even bolder and more wicked and take more action, as we witnessed basically when Biden took over in 2021 with all the mayhem unleashed against President Trump.
Okay, we're looking forward to that. The book is The Broken Whistle, A Deep State Run Amok. Pedro Orta, thank you for sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. God bless you.
Donald Trump's economic agenda for his first 100 days includes extending his tax cuts and imposing tariffs on imports. However, the Congressional Budget Office says extending the 2017 Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act could cost the economy more than $3 trillion over the next decade. Also, critics argue increased tariffs could cost the average middle-income consumer between $1,700 and $7,600 per year. Well, here to set us straight is Young Voices commentator, author, Texas Tech Associate Professor of Economics, Alexander Salter. Alexander, 75 million Americans voted to elect Donald Trump to a second term, and many are wondering how his proposed changes may affect the economy. So first, extending those 2017 tax cuts, want more money in consumer pockets, really help the economy out? What do you think?
I think people voted the way they voted because they're fed up with the high cost of living. And I think that there's a lot in the president-elect's agenda that's going to help address that by increasing the supply side of the economy. I like the idea of extending tax cuts. I like the idea of deregulation. All those things are going to make the economy more productive, which should mean that we see wages growing faster as the economy grows faster. And so while I think we also have to worry about perhaps tariffs raising the prices of specific goods and services for American consumers, you have to combine that with the other effects of Trump's economic plans that I think are a definite win for most Americans.
Well, let's get into that on the tariffs. I mean, he wants to increase tariffs on imported goods as much as 60% on China, 25% on Mexico. So what are your thoughts on increasing tariffs? Would it cost the average American, the households, thousands of dollars per year in higher cost goods? What?
Tariffs are a tax. There's no way getting around that. They do what they're designed to do, which is raise prices for consumers. Presumably, the whole goal is to deter consuming imports and to switch to consuming more American-made and manufactured goods. But there are real economic costs to that. The economic costs are that Americans are going to pay more out of pocket to get the goods and services that they want. What I don't think that tariffs will result in is sustained inflation of the kind that we saw in the COVID years. Americans have gotten used to dollar depreciation to the tune of 2 to 4% every year for the last 60 years. I don't really see Trump's economic agenda on the trade and protectionism angle contributing to an inflationary spiral. You should see prices rise pretty quickly, but once they rise to a new level, I don't think that we'll see much price growth beyond that.
During the campaign, Trump talked about eliminating the income tax and relying on tariffs for revenue like the country did pre-World War I. Could we do away with the federal income tax, and how would that work?
Not without greatly reducing federal spending. Taxing imports alone with tariffs would maybe raise 20% of the revenue at most that you could expect to fund government at its current levels. Now, the president-elect has promised to pare back government, but I don't think that he's going to pare it back so much that we can ditch the income tax system and replace it with a tariff-only system. I think the best way of understanding those remarks during the campaign were as an attempt to build an electoral coalition. It's one of those things that sounds really good and signals priorities, but I don't think that it's going to be something that we can seriously economically pursue. We still have to worry about the deficit. We're already spending much more money than we're taking in terms of federal revenue, and eventually that's going to come back to bite us. I hope that the Trump administration will do something about the deficit by slashing spending in addition to taxes. But if the record of the first administration is anything to go by, I think Republicans like deficit spending too, unfortunately.
Well, I know you believe cutting government spending is the best way to get inflation under control for the long term. And Trump has suggested a new government department, DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. So what do you think of that idea? And Elon Musk saying he can eliminate $2 trillion in government waste. Would that help?
Elon Musk as an efficiency czar is a very interesting idea. And if there really is $2 trillion worth of fat in federal expenditures, I'm all for trimming it. The question is, when push comes to shove, can you really swallow the political pill of pulling funding from interest groups that are going to raise a stink when their funding dries up? I guess the silver lining is that President-elect Trump is term limited. There cannot be a third Trump administration, so he doesn't have to worry about re-election. Maybe he's going to be willing to bite the bullet and actually do what's necessary to support paring back those revenues. But it's something that's very difficult to do. I'm not sure that we're going to get $2 trillion worth of cuts, but I certainly wouldn't mind any little bit, because ultimately what we have to do is bring the rate of growth of government spending below the rate of growth of the real economy. As long as we're producing new goods and services faster than we're increasing federal expenditures, that by itself is going to go a long way to repairing America's broken fiscal house.
And a lot of entitlements there that are hard to touch. Okay, Alexander Salter, author, commentator, Texas Tech Associate Professor of Economics. Thank you for setting us straight with your pre-Trump administration insights today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary.
Last month, during the presidential campaign, Donald Trump claimed that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, was not effectively responding to help victims of Hurricane Helene. Some members of the mainstream media reported that Trump was spreading a false conspiracy theory. Among them was a CBS News campaign reporter, her name Libby Cathy.
He also has repeated the claim that red areas, that Trump areas, are not getting the same support that blue areas are. There is no evidence to support that claim, Vlad, as FEMA is trying to, on the ground, combat this misinformation in real time.
Now we know that the president-elect was right. FEMA denied help to hurricane victims in both Florida and North Carolina if they displayed yard signs supporting Donald Trump on their property. The fact that this occurred in more than one state suggests it was not merely the decision of one rogue FEMA employee. The orders must have come from higher-ups. Congress needs to investigate this matter. Federal assistance should never depend on a person's political beliefs, religion, race, or creed. Such practices are too common in third-world dictatorships. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus tells how passers-by on the road to Jericho ignored a Jew who needed help. However, a Samaritan did stop and assist him. We should apply the teachings of Jesus, who instructs us to have mercy, even towards those with whom we disagree, and to go and do likewise, as the Good Samaritan did. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.